So where was this interest to look at so many activities? And not often you see somebody who has a very, very thriving practice to actually look at these things. And can you talk a little bit about where these, inspiration and motivation for you came from?
Okay, so I think to a certain extent, a lot of what we do is a result of our history. And initially, a lot of your history is contributed by your parents, your upbringing, the education. But gradually over time, I think we also need to remember that we learn a lot from our children as well. And for example, from my parents, got a great education, and my parents were always very socially minded. So, for example, they started an organic farm in Madhya Pradesh because they felt the soil was being damaged. This was way ahead of the time when no one was really talking about any of these climate change issues. So we have a site called Amrit Krishi, which we're trying to popularize the idea of how can you use Amrit Mutti, which is organic farming, to keep the soil healthy, because all these shortcuts of using chemical fertilizers never work. Similarly, they started an orphanage in Virar. It was saying, our kids have been blessed. What can we do for other people who aren't so fortunate? So some of that has always been ingrained, that you don't really earn your money to just for yourself. There's a lot more. There's that trusteeship concept. So I think a lot of that. And as I said, God has been kind. We've been taught to be frugal. Being a Marwadi helps a little bit because, you don't keep on trying to show off how much you have. Both my parents were doctors. So a little bit of that professionalism, the importance of putting patients first, that came in. And interestingly, for example, my daughters have had a very varied career, I would say. So, for example, most people think, hey, you're such successful doctors. I'm sure your kids must be doctors too. And we said, no, neither of them is. So, for example, the older one, she did a BSc, got a scholarship to go to Oxford to do an MSc in immunology. Didn't like that. Said, I want to do something else. She went to Cambridge to study environmental sciences. So, don't like that. Then she went to London and she worked in a social impact fund of funds called Big Capital. This is one of the world's largest fund of funds for social impact investing, and it was actually part of a government of UK. And she was one of the first few employees. And the point is, you need to keep up with your kids. You can't afford to, you don't want them to think of you as, oh, he's an old fogey, fuddy duddy dinosaur, doesn't understand anything. So these were all new words for me, very honestly. Profit with purpose, what social impact is, how do you combine it? So a lot of it made a lot of sense. And quite honestly, I think philanthropy is great, charity is great, but how do you make sure it outlives you? How do you create institutions which will grow? And that's what I really like. So there was that little bit of marrying capitalism with compassion, what's called compassionate capitalism. And since she was doing it and she was talking about EBITDAs and profit and loss and balance sheet, so I think I always tell my kids, thank you so much for keeping me on my toes. And that's one of the reasons why I'm an angel investor, because it's, hanging out with young entrepreneurs is so rewarding, because they come with a fintech background or an AI background or, whatever else it is, stuff which I don't know anything about. But I need to be sure that at least I can have an intelligent conversation with them. So I expect them to be able to teach me lots of stuff, and trust me, you learn a lot very, very quickly when you're learning from someone who's an expert. You also learn how well they're at bullshitting. Some of them are bullshit artists, which is also fine. Some of that, and you need to make mistakes. So I think the great thing about an angel investor is you learn very, very quickly. You lose money in the process, and I think that's fine. And I think as long as you're very clear in your head. So I measure my angel investments in terms of what I call an LOI, or learning on investment. It's really not a financial ROI. I doubt very much whether I'll make any money on any of my startups. By definition, they're very fragile. These are complex adaptive systems. Most of them have been designed to deliberately die and to fail. And I'll come back to that in a minute and explain why. But the point is, I can at least take a step back. So therefore, my asset allocation in my head is very clear. Professional income is very hard earned. You earn it by blood, sweat, tears. That's never money I would put in a startup. Trust me, just too much at stake. But God has been kind. The Indian markets have been kind. The Indian public markets have done very well. So the corpus has grown enormously. As a result of which, the passive income which I get from the public markets, the dividends, the share price increase has been so much that that's what I then allocate towards investing in startups. To that extent, then I'm not saying it's easy come, easy go. It's not like I'm writing the money off. But to that extent, you don't get so emotionally agitated when a startup fails because, okay, we tried our best, we followed the process, we learned from these mistakes. We won't repeat those mistakes again, and then we'll carry on. And so I think to that extent, I think the money now, the emotional income I get comes from my IVF practice. Because trust me, you give someone who doesn't have a baby, you've changed their life so dramatically, and nothing in the world can possibly match that smile of the baby and the smile of the couple who's had that baby. So that's my emotional income bucket. The financial income bucket comes from the markets, which, like I said, have been kind. I'm a very patient investor. I don't understand anything about investing in the public markets. So I outsource that. And I have great people whom I trust, whom I've been with for over 10 years now, who manage that piece very well. The angel investing piece allows me to marry a lot of this stuff so that then whatever I'm learning is no longer just theoretical or reading from a book. I'm actually getting a chance to apply it, but I don't need to do the hard work because I'm not capable of doing it. I don't have enough domain expertise. So kind of, I let my wife do all the hard clinical work. I let my PMS managers do all the hard investing work. Let my entrepreneurs do all the hard work of actually running a startup. And then I sit and have chats on podcasts with people like you.